The Lost in Transition podcast is sponsored by Health IQ, an insurance company that helps health-conscious people like runners, cyclists, and triathletes get lower rates on their life insurance. Go to healthiq.com/try to support the show and see if you qualify. Welcome to the Lost in Transition podcast. I'm your host, Chris Gerard. Triathlon season is not that far away. We're right in the middle of winter right now. A lot of people dealing with the creeping crud and trying to stay on their training plans. We've got a guest that has always been a hit tonight. Kevin Sprouse is back for the fourth time on the Lost in Transition podcast. He is the leader for the number of times on the show, and we're going to ask him how much you should push through the creeping crud and continue to train, and when you need to just take a break and get better, among many other topics that we will cover, including his comments on some of the latest doping controversies in both cycling and triathlon, and the purpose of TUEs, since that's been in the news a lot, especially with Chris Froome and Team Sky. Also, the latest medical technology that is coming across his plate there at Podium Sports Medicine here in Knoxville, and some of the latest goings on with their sports team for the upcoming season as well. It's a great time with Kevin Sprouse. Derek Tingle joining us in just a minute, too. Derek is a member of the Podium Sports Racing Team. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, the TuneIn Radio app, and on YouTube. And available for listening online anytime at losttransition.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. You know where to find us. And look for all our social media updates. Let us know what you'd like to hear for upcoming shows this spring, as we are just starting to make out the schedule right now. Let us know who or what you'd like to hear about in upcoming shows, and we will do our best to get that done for you. Without further ado, Kevin Sprouse on the Lost in Transition podcast. Dr. Kevin Sprouse is the founder of Podium Sports Medicine in Knoxville. He's the head of medicine for EF Education First Drapac, powered by Cannondale Pro Cycling Team, and he's been a frequent guest on the show. We're glad to have him back in the new year. Dr. Kevin Sprouse, welcome back to Lost in Transition.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
So we're sitting here in the middle of winter, and people are, training through the winter, but there's also that there's no races going on for the most part in the triathlon community. And it's time for the Hot Stove League, where everybody's talking about something. And right now, that something is doping and banned substances, because an Ironman age grouper was just banned for 8 years on his second positive for testosterone. And he was busted for this, I guess, just before Kona this past year, from what I saw. So this, of course, sends off tweet storms. Sebastian Kienle, talking about therapeutic use exemptions, said that he's been TUE free since 1984, and that basically there should be no TUEs allowed at all. Now, that's a pretty extreme statement right there. First off,
extreme statements to go with doping?
Yeah, well, no one ever does that, right? No one ever colors that in black and white. First off, for those who maybe haven't been following the whole Twitter controversy, what is a TUE? How does that work for a WADA or USADA sanctioned sport?
Yeah, so a TUE, that stands for Therapeutic Use Exemption, and that's basically being granted the right to use a banned medication or banned procedure like IV infusion during competition or at any time that it would be banned.
Right.
That TUE is granted by USADA or WADA with the idea that it doesn't. You have to prove that it doesn't give you an added advantage. It's just kind of bringing you back up to where you would be without it. So,
gotcha.
There's a lot of gray area in there and a lot of question marks. The way it happens generally is you fill out all kinds of paperwork, have to have all kinds of supporting documentation, and that goes in front of a panel of physicians. And that panel discusses it and decides basically what the outcome is.
So I assume part of the controversy, like you say, it's supposed to bring you back up to baseline, but of course what people will allege against somebody using a TUE is that maybe it's really doing more for them than that. I guess how do you, as a doctor who prescribes things, approach? I assume some of your riders have had to apply for TUEs before. How does that even come to be, where they get to the point where they know they might need something that might be on that list that gets them back to that baseline?
Sure. First, I'll say in 8 or 9 years of doing this, the number of times I've applied for a TUE could be counted on less than half of one of my hands. I mean, it's not, this is not in my practice or in the team that I work with or the athletes I work with, is not something that is done regularly.
And that's not necessarily true for every team per se.
From what I hear, it's not
right. We're not naming any names here, but in other places it's more common certainly than probably what you've dealt with.
Some people make use of the TUE system across the board in multiple sports to try to game the system and get a little bit of an advantage. Basically, to use a medication that is perhaps questionable medically, or maybe very questionable medically, but use it in a legal way. So I'll tell you, I don't have the greatest amount of experience in applying for these things. So in the application process, I may not be an expert. But I think Kienle has a good point
I was going to ask, where do you come down? I mean, the none ever is a pretty extreme statement. But
it is extreme. We need to have this ability to think with common sense and look at the rules and say, okay, sometimes there are situations that don't fit neatly in these rules, and that needs to go in front of a panel and say yay or nay, whether it can be a deviation from the rules. But in the same way that I've hardly ever applied for one of these, it should be a very rare occurrence, in my opinion. What Kienle said kind of follows my thinking as well, is that if you're sick enough to need to use a banned substance in competition, you probably don't need to be competing. You probably need to address that. Now that's 95% of the time. There are those 5% of the time where maybe that's different. People bring up asthma all the time, but asthma, you used to need a TUE for the inhaler, you don't anymore. So that was a common one where it was saying, look, these people have respiratory illness, they could use an inhaler, it's not going to make them any better, they're just going to get back to baseline. But that's not a real example anymore. That's been taken care of. You don't need that TUE. So for the vast majority of cases, if you need the TUE, there's a good chance you shouldn't be competing.
Right, and it's something that has kind of evolved, like you said, over time, because the asthma inhaler is one of the first things I heard of and learned that it was allowed. Of course, I used to use an inhaler pretty regularly when I was growing up, and I would have never even thought about that getting into the sport, which kind of brings us to another one of the points that's out there. The pros have a hard time keeping track of a lot of this stuff. The age groupers, it's almost hopeless. How do people even know if they're taking a banned substance?
Well, I'll tell you, it really starts with just the recognition that you need to pay attention to it. There's once you've made that step and said, okay, yeah, I'm a Cat 4 cyclist, or I'm a regionally semi-competitive triathlete, and I still need to pay attention to this, then you've crossed the biggest hurdle, because you at least recognize it. There are good resources. There's online resources. There's something called Global DRO.com or .org. I should have known that offhand. Sorry, but
that's okay. We'll look it up.
DRO. You can basically type in the medication you're taking. It'll tell you if it's banned. It doesn't work for supplements, and that's another conversation, because those aren't regulated. We can't be sure what's in those. But it works great for over-the-counter medications, prescription medications. Your doctor writes you something, and they're not a sports medicine doctor and not aware. Check it before you take it if you're competing. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't take the medicine, but you should at least know what you're dealing with, and maybe you need to not take it and compete.
So that kind of brings up another point: is are there any really common over-the-counter medications that about that we, just being in cold season and things like that, or even going into summer, need to be aware of and just kind of think about, hey, we're amateur athletes, but these could really get us popped?
Yeah. I would say the most common one, speaking of cold season, is Sudafed. It falls into the category of stimulants, which WADA publishes a list every year of their banned substances and like procedures. And they're categorized, and all of them have this caveat where they list a bunch of medicines and they say, or anything else like these. So you have to be careful, and that list changes every year. But one that's kind of a constant is Sudafed. It is what's called conditionally banned. So when you look at a medication, you see that it can either be banned in competition only, it can be banned at all times, which includes out of competition, which if you enter an Ironman or a sanctioned race, you can be tested out of competition. Is it likely to happen? No, but if they come knocking on your door because somebody has said, hey, I'm kind of concerned about this person, you can be tested. And if you refuse the test, it's the same as a positive. So there's in competition, out of competition, or kind of across the board. And then there's conditional, which means there's a level on it. So Sudafed's one where as long as you're below a certain level, you're fine to take it, but everyone metabolizes it a little differently. It's not that predictable. So my recommendation is always no Sudafed in competition. Stick with something like phenylephrine, a different over-the-counter a decongestant if you need it.
Gotcha. And one of the things that you just mentioned there too, and it's a big subject, but just to skim the surface of it, on supplements, because so many people, especially this time of year, are pounding the vitamin C and trying to stave off colds and respiratory stuff. And like you mentioned, often it is simply not, what goes in is not regulated, and that can leave athletes wondering what in the world is in what I'm taking. I know that you have, I believe, a line of vitamins that you have worked with before that has undergone, have they undergone some testing? Am I remembering that correctly? That can be used?
Yeah. We carry a supplement line in my office called Thorn Research. They're great. We don't sell a ton of supplements. That's not my line of business, but we keep them as a resource for athletes for this very reason, because they've undergone testing. They're what's called NSF certified for sport. So they're batch tested, and they're you can count on them being clean. There's NSF certification, there's informed choice, there's a few organizations out there that will test stuff. And more supplement companies are signing up and like agreeing to this process, but there's still tons of them out there that are very questionable. And one, there's a doping risk, and two, there's just the health risk of putting stuff in your body.
Oh, certainly, yeah. I mean, about. Very unregulated markets.
Yeah.
And at what level, I guess, we were talking about, your Category 4 moving to Category 3 cyclists. At some point, I mean, obviously your brand new triathlete is probably not going and looking at what kind of vitamins they're taking.
Sure.
But I'm guessing kind of that competitive upper 10% of the age groupers is maybe about when they have to start thinking a little bit more about what the chances are that they're going to be tested?
Yeah. So anybody who signs up for a sanctioned event for any WADA sport, so that can be a 10K, that can be a triathlon. Ironman has their own rules which kind of mirror WADA. And so anytime you're signing up for a sanctioned event, part of what you're agreeing to in that form is to abide by the anti-doping code for that sport. So everyone, technically, even if you're the last person to finish, has agreed that you're following this code. So as far as I'm concerned, if you've said you're going to do it, you need to pay attention to it.
Right.
Now, you may not get tested. If you're the last person, you're probably never going to get tested. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't stick to what you said you're doing. So the people that are likely to get tested are probably the very pointy end of the field, right? The overall, first, second, third place. Or, like I mentioned earlier, we're seeing more of this kind of, you can call into a tip line at USADA and say, hey, I've got reason to think this person is doping, and then they may come test you at the next race. So there's other ways that people are getting tested, and reasonably so. I actually brought up on my phone here because I can't remember this. There's something called a recreational competitor TUE that USADA implemented about a year ago.
Okay.
And I just want to mention what the qualifications are. This takes you from a different level of necessity in terms of filing a TUE. So testosterone is one that comes into play often with men. A lot of men are taking testosterone supplementation in their 40s, 50s, and beyond, and a lot of them don't realize that is a banned substance. So it used to be that across the board it was banned in all competitors, and very hard to get a TUE, and by hard I mean impossible.
Right.
USADA implemented this recreational competitor level where it's a little easier to get TUEs for these type of things, But here's what you have to be. So it's an athlete who has not been classified as a professional athlete within the last 25 years, has not been in the testing pool or the registered testing pool of an international federation ever, has not represented the U.S. at an international event, has not won any national or regional level competition in any sport. So all those people are pretty competitive.
Right.
But then has not finished first, second, or third in any age group category of any event sanctioned by a national government.
I'm not good, and I've won an age group. I've won an age group by default.
Which 50 or more competitors have been entered. So,
total or age group?
Yeah, it doesn't say actually.
So probably the more strict interpretation would be 50 in total. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I don't qualify. So
No?
It really trickles down to, guys like me who are generally pack fodder.
Right.
Who I wouldn't qualify for a recreational competitor.
That really seems like that could be broadened out yet a little bit further. I mean, maybe more along the line of national ranking or something like that, where you could...
Perhaps, but then it goes back to that question of, if you're truly needing a TUE, should you be competing? Like, is there something else wrong physiologically that should be addressed before you worry about competing in endurance events? And I don't know what the right answer is. I'm not suggesting that, but I think there's a good argument for both sides.
Certainly, yeah. That you can. I guess you can get as deep into this as you really want to get.
Yeah.
My thoughts, on this is really you just need as an athlete to be informed. You need to understand that what you're doing is a competitive sport, and really anything that could give you a competitive advantage is cheating. Yeah. One way or the other, it's cheating. So, it's all the responsibility of the athlete. But on that point, you got to say too, is obviously you're in a different boat, being that you are team doctor for a professional cycling team, so you have a little bit more info and knowledge on this than maybe the standard physician might. So for those that don't have access to that sort of physician, or don't see somebody like that, somebody that just goes to general practice, any thoughts on that as to questions they could ask to that physician that may or may not help them narrow down what they may be taking or something like that, whether it might be...
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic question, because this comes up often, and I see it in my office when I'm going over medical lists with people. Again, recreational level athletes, local athletes, regional athletes. Most doctors outside of sports medicine, they don't know this list, and there's a misconception that, well, if it's prescribed and we have notes for it, you're fine. And I'm not just making up this misconception. I've heard it 100 times at least, that, well, my doctor said, he's treated athletes before, and as long as you have a prescription, you're fine. And that's really unfortunate, because what it comes down to, if you're caught for some reason, for whatever reason it may be, that doctor doesn't get any penalty. The only person getting a penalty is the athlete. So I would say, first and foremost, talk to a sports medicine physician about this. Anyone who's done fellowship training and is certified in sports medicine should be well aware, at least of the fact that the list exists, and then they can go reference it. So they can help you in that regard. We offer a service, where I will just sit down with a patient and just go through their list and look to make sure that they're not taking anything that they're unaware is banned or problematic, like Sudafed. So there are ways to just get a quick kind of review of your medications. The other thing you can do, there's the website I mentioned, there's the USADA list, or the WADA list. You can call USADA and ask them. They're actually very helpful. They're not there just to ding as many athletes as they can.
They're not a big evil entity just hovering over you like the Empire in Star Wars.
No, they're really helpful. And a lot of people kind of, are all worried about them, that they're just the police, but they're not. That their whole goal is to maintain, a quote unquote level playing field, which is a conversation for another time, whether that can exist. But they really
get real philosophical with that.
Yeah, right.
But fair sport, clean sport. And so, there's been a number of times where I've called and spoken to, they've got an ombudsman, which is just the person you call and ask questions. And they're kind of there on your side to help you and make sure that you are doing the right thing. So
but just in case, call from your friend's phone.
Right. Or get a burner. No. I mean, I can't say enough how helpful they've been every time I've ever been in touch with them.
Well, that's great. We'll post up that list, obviously, with the Global DRO. We'll post up that link. It is globaldro.com. I did find out, and we'll post that up in the show notes so people can check that out. Let technology be your friend here, because it can be really confusing otherwise.
That's right.
The information is out there, people.
Yes, it is, and we're working to get it out to more people, so the ignorance that's just been out there is lessened somewhat. Health IQ uses science and data to secure lower rates on life insurance for triathletes. In order to get these lower rates, you have to qualify. And we've talked a lot about how much you can save, but we really haven't talked a whole lot about the qualification process. So let's go over a few of the methods you can use to save up to 33% off of term life insurance by using one or more of the following methods. You can take a Health IQ quiz, and scoring elite on that will entitle you to some savings at their website, healthiq.com. Also, screenshots from activity tracking apps like Strava, Runkeeper, Nike, Garmin, Map My Ride, and Map My Run. If they see that you are active, that will play in your favor. For running, they look for at least 10 miles a week on average, and for cycling, around 50 miles per week. Also, a screenshot from a competition or a race result from the past 3 years with a qualifying age-graded score. If you have a good race result from the past few years, that may help as well. All of these different ways to prove for real that you are a triathlete, and we know you're a real triathlete if you're listening to this show, so you should have some of that data around to pass on to Health IQ so they can pass the savings on to you. To see if you qualify, get your free quote today and support the show at healthiq.com/try, or mention the promo code TRY when you talk to a Health IQ agent. That's healthiq.com/TRI. Speaking of technology, some exciting new things you've been doing at Podium. I know last time you were on the show, we were talking about blood glucose monitoring.
Yeah.
And you were at the time, I think, kind of experimenting a little bit to see how it worked with your individual patients. It's been, 4 or 5 months since we last spoke to you. What have you seen with that?
I'm a big fan of it. So what we're talking about is the continuous glucose monitor. It's a monitor that you wear. The one we have is you wear on the back of your arm, and it monitors your blood sugar levels for anywhere from 4 or 5 days up to 2 weeks, 24 hours a day. And you correlate that to, we do a diet log with it, exercise log, get an idea of how you're sleeping. And it gives us really good data that looks at how your blood sugar responds to all those various stresses and recoveries. It's been fascinating. We've done it in diabetics and non-diabetics. It can help tailor your diet just for overall wellness. It can help tailor your diet for the purposes of training and competing. So I think it's a great tool.
That's really cool. I personally, I have another question. You've got another really neat technology test feature coming up now. It's Inside. Yeah. I have a specific interest in this because I'm going to be the victim of this tomorrow.
That's right.
So by the time this airs, actually several days ago.
So several days ago, I will have gone through this.
So if he doesn't make it, we'll post a memorial on the website.
So what kind of glorious pain am I going to put myself through in the name of data tomorrow?
Less than a typical test like this. So Inside is a VO2 and lactate test, and it's a new protocol that we've started using. Inside is INSCYD, and it's a company out of Switzerland. And this protocol has been developed over a number of years by a physiologist named Sebastian Weber and his group out of kind of Germany and Switzerland. And they work with a number of pro cyclists, the French Swimming Federation. They work with the coach for Jan Frodeno. And this is how they gather information, physiologic information on their athletes. And so what it does is it takes the old lactate and VO2 step protocol where every 3 minutes it gets harder, and we, at the end of that 3 or 5 minute stage, we prick your finger and check your heart rate and all those things. And it takes it and kind of dissociates it. So you do like a warm up, and then you'll do an effort of 4 to 5 minutes, and then you stop, and we let your lactate recover, and then you'll spin back up and you'll do another maybe 2 or 3 efforts, and then you stop and recover. And so we get this very unique lactate profile that shows not only how quickly you accumulate lactate for a given effort, lactate being kind of a marker of how your body's reacting to an effort physiologically, and consequently what your fitness looks like. But so we get this very unique profile from that, and we can also tell things like substrate utilization. So at a given effort, how much fat are you burning, how much carbohydrate are you burning, how many calories are you burning, and we can put together what's called a metabolic fingerprint. So looking at multiple components of fitness and performance, and see where you excel and where you're lagging behind and where you need to focus your training.
Very cool. I'm looking forward to getting that data.
I think you'll have fun with it.
That goes back to that whole fun thing, and we as endurance, I don't think that word means what we think it means. But that leads me into another question is, obviously, I mean, for me, it's off season, but I'm starting to build right now. My first biggest big race of the year is duathlon Nats, which is coming up in April. So, timing of testing for athletes, going in for this type of test, or really for any type of VO2 type test. Thoughts on that? Am I getting the timing right, or am I?
No, I think you're. I mean, first and foremost, I think there's no time like the present, and I don't mean that from like a sales pitch thing. Do it with whoever. Like, it doesn't have to be in our office, but if you've not tested before, or it's been a while, get tested, because you can't really have the most accurate and efficient training program without knowing that data. And field tests are fine, and they serve a purpose, and I'm certainly not against them, but they're just estimating what the lab tells you definitively. There's a great way to plan it out, and we'll talk about that. But if you've not tested, and you kind of maybe should have tested a couple months ago, don't sweat that. Test now, recalibrate your zones, and move forward. But all things being equal and well planned out, I would say kind of coming out of the winter, or whatever your off season is, as you start to ramp it back up like you are now, do that first test. Get an idea of where you are, calibrate your training zones, know what you need to be working on as you really ramp up your training. And then anywhere from 3 to 6 months later, depending on your goals and your schedule and how things lay out, most people have kind of an ebb and flow to their calendar. So usually you'll kind of do a few key races, have a little time off, and then hit it again. And so whenever that little off period comes, great time to retest. See how the training that you've done has impacted your fitness, what's gone right, what hasn't. Recalibrate, hit it again for the second half.
Got it. Sounds good. So basically what you're saying, like for me, I'm kind of building towards like almost like a 2-goal race season. I've got early season, which is going to be more like late May for the Xterra Southeast Championships in Oak Mountain. But then I'm going to take another build from now, kind of drop down. I'll take another build later in the season. So kind of before I really start that second build, look at maybe coming back in and redoing the test, and that way we get an idea if I need to adjust my zones and stuff from there. So
absolutely, because I mean, training is not, it's a science, but there's a lot of art to it.
Right.
And so, even the best coaches lay out a beautiful plan, and the athlete follows it perfectly, and the results at the end of the day aren't exactly what is expected, because there's all kinds of variables in there. And so what you do then is you look, maybe after you've kind of done that first push and you've hit those key races, take a week or two, kind of, rest, and then, test there where you can see what the result was from all that training and racing, and then you can see what you need to change to do better in the second half, because it's always an improvement. You're always looking for that improvement.
Got it.
Right around this time of year, this is a question we've asked before, and we've got to ask it again. Let's see, I've been sick for about 30 days. And, nothing bad for a couple of weeks, but that nagging cough, and I even felt it this weekend. I went and did 2 long runs this weekend, kind of split it up a little bit because I knew my body couldn't take the one long one, so I did 2 slightly shorter ones. And I knew that I was going to kind of fall back off and the cough was going to start up again. First off, when should people just up and stop training altogether?
Sooner than they do. And that's kind of a universal truth. It's part of it depends on where you are in the season, I think.
Right.
I mean, the true answer is if you feel sick, stop. Right. I mean, that's the easy answer from a doctor's standpoint.
Right.
But as a sports medicine doctor, knowing that people have time and money invested and have a specific goal they're moving towards, sometimes that's not the right answer, right?
We're endurance athletes, man. We got to fight through the pain.
Right.
Come on.
And so then the key is figuring out what can you push through and what can't you. This time of year, it's much more likely to be the right thing to just say, just stop. Just take 4 or 5 days a week off and let your body heal, because you can. As the season goes on and you get closer to those goal races, it becomes a little more important to say, okay, well, is this something you can maybe push through and get a little extra sleep, or is this something you need to truly take off? If you've got a fever, don't exercise.
Right.
Just don't. I mean, even if it's just a common cold or something, you can get a viral myocarditis where the virus goes to the heart muscle and permanently damages it. Right? It's not worth it. Take an extra day or 2 off and wait until you don't have a fever.
I'd imagine if you have like a gastroenteritis thing for everyone else's sake, don't try to exercise.
Yeah, don't do that swim workout.
Don't do this.
No, but
you're nagging sniffles, coughs, and colds that everyone's dealing with right now. Like my own case, I took 2 full weeks off when it was really cold because I knew that I would just get into a coughing fit if I went outside and tried to run when it was a wind chill of 5 degrees outside.
Oh, absolutely.
It led to some ridiculous extremes, i.e. doing a 15-mile run on a 30-lap per mile track.
Oh, you are out of your mind for that, by the way.
That's
your tolerance for just mind-numbing activities,
I will
Chris,
admit, the first 40 minutes kind of sucked, and then after that it's just like whatever.
I hope you only had to make left turns driving home, like just.
Well, I reversed every mile because I knew I would have to 450 laps.
No, I mean, I think if the symptoms are above the neck and above, and you don't have a fever and you don't have like body aches and systemic stuff, like it's just kind of a runny nose, sinus pressure, I think you're okay to go easy. Like that's not the day to do crazy hard intervals, because it's just going to get worse. You're just going to put yourself in a place where it becomes a sinus infection and you get a fever or it moves your chest. But if it's just kind of a nagging thing, neck and head, like you could probably do something easy. But if it's been going on really more than a week or 10 days, I'd say see a doctor. I mean, you might have something that would be. Sometimes what happens is you get a viral infection that causes a cough or some sinus irritation or whatever, and it hangs around so long that those congested sinuses become kind of a petri dish, and you can get a bacterial infection on top of it. So there comes a time where, even though I'm not quick to prescribe antibiotics, where it becomes potentially a very appropriate use of them.
And as far as returning to training, I guess everyone's different, but the overarching goal for everybody would be to ease back into things.
It is.
To not try to just start off right where you left off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, have some common sense about it. I mean, sometimes if you just think about what your mom would tell you to do, it's kind of the right answer, right? But one of the things that I like to have pretty much all athletes use, although not all will, is some sort of objective recovery metric. So not because there's anything magical in it necessarily. Some of the tools are great, some aren't. I think they can all be useful because they draw your attention to it. So if like I wear one of these Whoop bands, there's Fitbit, Garmin, there's HRV for training you can put on your phone. All these things are useful in their own way, but most importantly, if you're kind of hemming and hawing and say, okay, well, I could maybe go out for an easy run today, or I'm feeling better, I'm going to hit it hard. These things give you a score that basically tells you, yes, you can go hard today, or no, you can't.
So that's that screen on my Garmin when I start my run that always beeps at me and tells me,
Yes.
5 minutes into my run, that I probably shouldn't be doing this run?
Yes.
That's the screen? Okay.
That screen.
The one that I promptly ignore and continue
Right.
to... Yeah, okay.
Right. And what I like even better are the ones that tell you a little more preemptively. That function on the Garmin, yeah, honestly, I love Garmin. I've got Garmin everything. That's not one of my favorite functions. I don't really, I'm already doing it. I don't know what to do at that point. The ones that will tell you, before you even head out, like first thing in the morning, give you an idea of what your body's capable of that day, I think those are much more useful.
Cool. Okay, well, let's get into something a little lighter and a little more self-serving for you, I guess.
Okay.
Podium.
Great.
Let's talk about Podium. We got some cool things going on this year. We've talked about some of the new testing going on. If anybody's been following on Instagram, Facebook, social media, I know you guys have been posting up the Podium pop-ups. We've got the trailer coming out, doing coffee and stuff for athletes, just as a cool thing to do. There's the Strava segments that you've got posted up there now. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of those cool things that are going on.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, we're trying to make things a little more, fun and interactive outside of just Podium. I mean, we have a lot of fun at Podium, but taking it outside the walls. And so we've set up, we're going to do roughly monthly. It won't be exactly every month, but we're going to post regularly that we're having 2 Strava segments. One will be on the bike and one will be on the run. And they'll kind of pop up somewhere around town. And for that period of time, whoever does it the fastest will get some sort of prize at Podium. This month, I think it's a $50 gift card to come use for training or for the performance lab or whatever. And in addition, anybody who does it, we may pick some random people out of there who did really well for them on that segment, and give them something as well. So it's not just that top spot, but we're kind of letting everybody know what that top spot will be. And then along with that, so this month it's all the 2 courses leave out of Meads Quarry. So whether it's the trail run, there's a mountain bike ride. So we thought it'd be fun to go out last Saturday, take the trailer, provide some warm drinks and some recovery stuff for anybody who's out there playing around on the trails. Another thing we're doing is we've made a leaderboard for our performance lab. So VO2 max and lactate threshold. VO2 max is kind of the units for it have body weight in the denominator, so it normalizes it. So it doesn't matter if you're competing against somebody twice your size or half your size, whatever. And so we'll keep a running tally, and it's totally optional. If you come in and do the performance lab, you don't have to do this. But if you agree to do it, we'll keep the top 3 men and women for VO2 max and for lactate threshold. And if you take the top spot, then you get 25% off your test. I'm almost sure that's what it is.
We're going to hold you to it now.
It is now, right. 25% off your test that day, which can be a pretty significant amount. So we'll have that running kind of all year and probably on through next year. We've talked about maybe resetting it each year. So right now, all those categories aren't full. We've got, for running and biking, we've got VO2 max and lactate threshold and men and women. So I can't do the math, but that's a lot of categories. Whoever comes in early on, if you test right now, there's a really good chance that you just set the top spot and you get 25% off your test.
So what you're saying is you're giving an incentive to a bunch of hyper-competitive people to be hyper-competitive.
Yes, hyper-competitive.
More hyper.
More hyper. How that works.
Cool.
So trying to come up with things like that make it fun, that make it a little more interactive, that take it kind of out on the road, so to speak.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think it's a lot of fun.
That'd be really cool. And then I also want to touch on too, you're doing a kids team this year, yes?
We are, yeah. And it's very loose. Basically my son is 7 and he likes to get free kit. And that's what it comes down to. So he has wanted to have a team now for a couple of years. He did his first triathlon at the end of last summer, and has done some bike races and like 1 mile fun runs. And so this year we decided, we'll put together a little kids team. So it's pretty small. We're starting out. I should be able to tell you maybe 8 kids.
Oh wow!
And it's going to be very. I mean, there's no requirements for them. There's no anything other than just have fun, and hopefully you'll come out and participate.
Just getting kids involved in the sport.
Yep, and we'll have a couple clinics where the adult team comes and kind of shows them how to do a transition or shows them some mountain bike skills. But very, very laid back, no pressure, just having fun.
Very, very cool. Very cool.
Looking forward to 2018 here. The first thing when I thought when you were talking about the Strava segments is, do your rules exclude Phil Guyman from that? He's just going to come in and eat up all your gift cards.
Yes, Phil's excluded.
Okay, we'll be sure to let him know that.
we need to write that in the
rules somewhere for sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of other team alumni, though, off doing things, Andrew Talansky.
Yeah.
Doing triathlons. What the hell is he doing there?
I know. Ironman. And one of his official sponsors is Podium Sports Medicine.
That's awesome. Now, and you're going to be doing some support work for him, I guess, this year?
Yeah, I'm continuing with him as his physician as he takes this on and helping him kind of address this new goal.
Right.
So it's really a lot of fun. We've been in pretty close contact, and he's having a blast with it.
I haven't followed closely enough to know what is his background in the other two sports. Did he bring anything previous experience wise to that, or is he kind of learning the ropes as he goes?
He's I'd say it's in between. He was a high school cross country runner, and he was a competitive swimmer back in the, I think, middle school, high school days. So he's got some background. Learning a swim stroke was no big deal. He kind of was a swimmer. He's really good surfer too, so he spends a lot of time in the water. So it's really taking that bike fitness, which is obviously there, and transitioning it to the swim and the run in a way that is, he's got super strong muscles, he's got a huge engine, and he's got no recent history of doing these things. So it's really a matter of kind of titrating that training, because he can probably, he can handle so much, but you want to make sure it's an incremental kind of process.
Right. Well, that'd be interesting to watch that unfold. Do you know offhand what races he's doing kind of in the run up to Ironman?
I don't, and that's something that I know he's starting to nail down, and I don't know yet.
That'll be fun to watch, regardless.
Sounds like somebody you need to reach out to.
We
be a
need
guest.
to talk to Andrew.
Andrew, if you're out there.
Oh yeah. All right, let's get him on.
Absolutely.
No, he's taken a very realistic approach too. He wants to be at Kona this year, and then he's looking at it as kind of a 3-year project.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not going to Kona to win this year.
Right.
I mean, if he does, he's going to.
Right, he's
a pro athlete. He's going to go as hard as he can. But he's
realistically knowing that there are a lot of people that have done it for a lot longer and are ridiculously talented.
Right. So I think he'd be an interesting guest, because he's got a very interesting viewpoint on it.
Absolutely, and I know you're traveling quite a bit this year too. In fact, you're taking off somewhere this week, right?
Yeah, we've got team camp for the cycling team started in Girona today or tomorrow. And I leave Thursday, and I'll be there for a few days doing kind of medical intake and just meeting some of the new riders and standard early season stuff.
What's the weather like over there right now?
I think it's about 65 and sunny. So I'm hoping that holds. Yeah. Be nice.
It's a rough life. Somebody's got to do that job.
Yeah. I know.
Of course, it seems like from what you said before, you see these regions from the back of the team car or at the hotel in the morning, so it's not exactly vacation time for you by any means. But
it's not vacation. One good thing about camp is we are in one place the whole time, so there's a little bit more time to be there.
Does camp bring together the entire team then? Okay, because I know during the Grand Tours you split up and it's 9 riders per Grand Tour team, correct?
Right. 8 this year. They're taking it down to 8 for Grand Tours, 7 for the other races. So because of that, our team has shrunk, because we don't need as many riders. So we now have 25 riders, but all 25 will be at camp.
Right.
And then all the staff and everybody else, sponsors and whatnot.
So I'm sure that'll be fun to get everybody together and see where people are at. And
it's usually a good time.
Some new faces, I assume, this year probably too.
Yeah, 10 new riders.
Oh my goodness.
25.
Whew.
I know.
All right. Got to learn a lot of different people's names and at least a few words in their languages and whatnot. Always a lot of countries represented, at least 7 or 8 from what I saw last year.
We tend to have a very multinational team, which makes it a whole lot of fun. I mean,
I'm sure. Good recipes. Nothing else.
Great recipes, exactly. We have a recipe swap every evening.
Going over for the tour, I assume, for part of it again this year?
I will. I was trying to think through my schedule. I go over for a tour of the Basque Country, which is a race I love, a region I really love. I'll go for the first part of the Giro d'Italia, which starts in Jerusalem. So we'll spend 3 days in Israel and then go over to Italy.
I didn't think Jerusalem was in Italy. But
right. So we'll do that, and then I do the first part of the Tour de France. I think that's it. There may be one other, but that's pretty much my calendar. And then I'll go to Kona for the Ironman.
Busy enough. And once again, the website for Podium is at podiumsportsmedicine.com.
Podiumsportsmed.com.
Sportsmed.com. We'll link that up. And thanks so much for joining us on the show. Always great to have you here. Best of luck in 2018, and we'll be looking forward to seeing who gets up on the VO2 Max leaderboards.
That's right. Maybe it'll be you.
It might be you. Check it out. Thanks.
Thank you.
Remember to subscribe, rate, and review Lost in Transition on iTunes. It helps us reach a greater audience of triathletes out there. Also available for listening on Stitcher, Google Play, the TuneIn Radio app, and on YouTube. And, of course, also available at the website along with show notes at losttransition.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter for our social media updates. Let us know who you'd like to hear on these upcoming shows this spring. We're making out the schedule right now, as I mentioned at the top of the show. And now is a great time to get your suggestions in. We will talk to you again soon. For Derek Tingle, I'm Chris Gerard. Until next time, may all your transitions be smooth.